In every video where I shoot film, there's one question that comes up all the time. How did you rate the film or how do you overexpose film? It seems like that a lot of people are confused about how rating or overexposing film actually works. Just recently, when I was in Bangkok, I shot a video with my buddy Ivan and we were talking about how to expose film and how rating, overexposing and pushing film works.
What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. With me here today I have Robin. How are you doing, Robin? You good?
Should be the other way around, it's my channel. So, hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Ivan. I told you that he would be here and today we want to make a video talking about how to expose film because I get so many questions about it. And after the video we shot in Korea last year, he picked up a film camera and now he owns a...
Yeah, I own the Mamiya RB67, which you may have already seen here in the channel. And
Not yet, but it will come.
Not yet? Okay.
No.
So, doing a chronological jump here. But anyway, since I first started shooting film, I have had a few questions. Some of them I have kind of answered along the few months that have passed, but a few still linger. And I know a lot of you also share the same questions, so we were talking, and we thought that maybe we could converse a little bit and maybe clear some of those up.
Okay.
So yeah, question number one. So how do you expose film?
Most people that start to shoot film they probably start out with digital photography. And shooting digital and film in terms of exposure is very, very different. It's almost, I would say it's the opposite.
Yeah.
If you shoot digital, you make sure the highlights are not blown because if they're blown, they're just gone. Like it's just nothing in between basically. Some cameras you can recover the highlights a little, but that's it. On the other side, if you're underexposed, you can usually raise the shadows a couple stops without any like introduction of noise. Usually it's fine. But when you shoot film, it's different. Because when you shoot film, you should make sure that you don't underexpose. Because if you underexpose, the shadows are gone. On the other hand, overexposure, not a problem. You can expose film like crazy. I had film overexposed accidentally by 7-8 stops and it was still usable. It's unbelievable. So yeah, I think it's a thing that you have to have like a mind shift when it comes to shooting film because it's very different in terms of exposure.
So if we keep in mind that in film you should overexpose, which is a really common technique, what is the difference between overexposing and pushing and pulling? Because a lot of people get those wrong.
Yes, and also rating, how to rate film.
Yeah.
Yes, when I overexpose film, I do this with a purpose. And the purpose is because I like the look of overexposed film. And also if I overexpose film, I make sure that the shadows are not dark and there's at least some details in the shadows. If you overexpose film like quite a bit and maybe you lose details, it's a gradient, so it's very smooth from being okay to being not okay. So it's very smooth and it doesn't look bad. If you overexpose, for instance, portrait, you may have seen it, the colors get very creamy and pastelish, and yes, I simply like the look. There's people that don't like the look, but I do like it. So this is the overexposure part. And a lot of people ask me, how I rate film and how I overexpose. Usually how I overexpose is I get a meter reading. For instance, I tell my meter this film has an ISO of 400. The light meter will give me like maybe 1/250th of a second. And now I want to overexpose my film by 2 stops. So I go down the shutter speed to 1/60th of a second, for instance. Then I'm 2 stops over. Or I can rate my film differently. And that means if I shoot, for instance, portrait 800, I will simply tell my light meter that I'm shooting an ISO 200 film, so then the light mirror will give me automatically 1/60th of a second. That's how this whole rating thing works. In the end, it's pretty much the same thing. I can do the math in my head, or rating means I tell the light meter to overexpose.
Yeah, I think this is like, at least for me, is the trick to thinking about this. Rating is something you do for your light meter.
Yes.
It's not really a photographic process.
Yes.
And pushing and pulling are development process. It's also not a thing that you really do in the camera.
If you want to push film, for instance, I push film not to gain more light or whatever, because if there's no light, there's no light. By pushing, you cannot just by magic make it brighter out. That's not possible. What you do is the highlights get more dense. The shadows maybe get lifted up a little bit more. Also, you introduce more contrast and more noise. The look is the thing that attracts me when pushing film. And also when I'm pushing film and I'm using a light meter to meter a scene, for instance, I want to push Tri-X 400 to 1600. What I usually do, I take the light meter. If I use a light meter, I take the light meter and I set it to 800 speed, not 1600, 800, because then I have one stop more overexposure when I push it further than 800. So to have a little bit more leeway. That's what I usually do. So I tell the meter, hey, this is an 800 speed film, meter for 800. But in the end, when I develop, I will develop as it would be 1600, or I push it to 1600 from 400, like 2 stops.
So in the development process, you would just leave it a little bit more time to
yes. So
okay.
And yeah, the lab. If I tell the lab, hey, please push 2 stops, so they will let the film in the developer longer, or usually I do it myself. Same thing applies. On the other hand, there's pulling film, but to be honest, I don't do this. I've never done it. It's the opposite from pushing. But I don't see any reason for me to pull a film, to be honest. Not really.
So one of the things that I know that trips me is, and probably a lot of other people, is that there are different types of film. And you expose for those different types of film differently. In particular, there is slide and color negative. And those are, I believe you have to be really precise with slide.
Yes. For instance, slide film like this Provia or Velvia or the new Actachrome, you have to be more careful, of course. Those kind of films you better don't overexpose, or maybe half a stop. Or on the other hand, you don't underexpose them either, because then they look really bad. There are instances where you have a lot of contrast. If you, for instance, you shoot a portrait and then you make sure that the face is perfectly lit, but the background can fall into darkness and there might not be any details. Okay. That's totally fine. It's a very, very different look compared to, like, if you shoot like here, for instance, Portra 400. Slide film is nice. In terms of exposure, you have to be a lot more careful. It's a different story when you shoot black and white film, because black and white film has a lot of latitude, at least as much as color negative film. I would say that some have even more. So here you can go really crazy if you want to. The one thing that I would like to add is, if you don't have a light meter, you have one?
Yeah, I think I know what we're about to say. Is it like, I don't. I have an application on my phone.
Yes.
And it's like metering, unless you're using a slide film, is almost an afterthought when you're shooting film.
Yeah, exactly. So when I started shooting film, I thought, I don't know, it's really hard to get the exposure. Yeah. But the thing is, shooting film, getting a correct exposure or a good exposure, I mean, there's no such thing as correct exposure, I would say. But getting there, it's very easy, to be honest. It's much easier than when shooting digital. Even on digital, you can cheat and just by looking. Or if you shoot a mirrorless camera, you can already see in the viewfinder if it's good or not. Yeah. But when you shoot film, it's very, very easy. And one thing that is very important, always try to stay on the side of overexposure. If you're not sure, maybe give 1 stop or 2 more if you can. If the shutter speed is fast enough and you can, just give it a little bit more, just to make sure you're staying on the side of overexposure. If you do, you're pretty much good, and then you will get really nice colors and good results.
Yeah, it just works in a really bizarre way that you end up never really having to meter unless you're doing something very specific or you're using slide film.
I especially noticed that when I shot flash, because when I shoot flash on digital and it's set to like a lot of power, then yes, the subject is completely just white. It's no details, nothing. But when I did the same on film, I had never ever shot a film on film with a flash and the subject was like too bright. When I shot color negative film, this never happened. So this is a good indicator that you can go really crazy on your exposure and still get good photos. Okay. But the thing is, there's one more thing that's also really important when it comes to exposure. That is your lab. I mean, getting the right exposure in the camera is one thing, But the lab is another thing that is also really important, because a lot of labs, they will develop your photo, they will scan it, but they will give you no feedback. They won't tell you, oh, maybe the exposure was a little, maybe next time give it one stop more, or maybe two. But a really good lab will tell you, hey, your exposure was spot on, or maybe next time give it a little bit more, or they probably I've never been told like, it's too bright. I mean,
Okay.
because they can compensate that easily. The thing is, for instance, I will show you two photos here. And this one photo I accidentally underexposed by 2 stops. So the next one is a correct exposure. If you see them side by side, you cannot really tell a big difference, but if you go in 100%, you can see like this one photo is much more grainy than the other one. And usually if you get photos like this, really grainy ones, you might think, this film is not good, it looks really grainy, it's ugly and like muddy looking. But in the end, it was your fault because you were underexposing. And in my experience, a lot of people, especially if they start out shooting film, they are very cautious about their not getting the image overexposed, and then they tend to underexpose all the time or a lot, and the photos don't turn out. So I think that should pretty much cover everything. So let's maybe summarize. If you're exposed for film, make sure to overexpose. If you're not sure about the exposure, give it 1-2 stops more. It's better than being on the side of underexposure, unless you want the look. But for me personally, I don't like it. I'm not a fan. It looks really muddy. It's not great. So that's the advice I would give you. And if you want to know how to expose film at night, when you shoot street photography at night, I already made a video about settings for street photography, so go and check it out. I will link it somewhere up there.
One extra question.
Yeah, cool.
Do you edit your film? Like, do you edit in Lightroom or whatever? Like, do you edit the scans?
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Depends on how good the scans are.
So, a thought about this.
Yeah.
If you overexpose film a lot, what
Yeah.
tends to happen is that you flatten the image a little bit.
Yes.
So, like, you raise the shadows and you like.
Yes. What happens is.
Yeah, you get a flatter look.
Yeah.
And if you want a more contrasty look, it's easier to achieve that in.
Yeah, in post,
Like,
of course.
yeah, so
of course.
you can manipulate a little bit.
Film is organic. When you expose longer, there will be more on the film. So, for instance, the highlights, they will go up slightly if you overexpose, and the shadows, they will come up even more. So in the end, it's the distance, the difference between highlights and shadows will be less. So that's what he was saying. The image will get flatter. It's less contrasty, and if you scan that, then you have a lot of opportunity in post. If you get TIFF files, for instance, then you can do whatever you want, bring down the shadows again. But if for some reason you're underexposed, then it's much harder, because I mean, you might be able to bring up the highlights, make them brighter, but the shadows are gone. If there's no detail, if you have seen an underexposed negative, you know what I'm talking about. There's pretty much no detail. It's just blank. There's nothing.
And the thing is, like, when you're messing with raw digital data, what you're messing with is camera algorithm. So, like, the camera captured more light than it allows you to see.
Yeah.
So you can generally extract some stuff there, but if in film, if it's not exposed, it's not exposed. Like this.
Yes.
There is nothing to take out.
Yeah. Except on the highlight side, which is like absolutely crazy. I mean, I had negatives that are so dense it was really hard to see anything on it, but the scans look fine. I was really surprised. So yeah, like I said, this is like pretty much it. Try to overexpose your scans. Try to overexpose the guy jogging behind us. So like I mentioned, try to overexpose, and usually that's it. That's really, really simple, really. I mean, he picked it up so super quick. Just overexpose and you're fine.
It is surprising also, because one of the things you learn, especially if you're going to shoot medium format like I am, one of the things you notice this really quickly, there are not a lot of options for exposure if you don't want to use a tripod.
Yes.
If you want to handheld a camera, which is my case, it's just like you have like 3 usable shutter speeds. So you're kind of stuck in this box where you're going to do something like, and it's just, you don't have that many options. The good part is, because of that, you very quickly realize that there is not a lot that can go wrong. Like, it's really simple in the end of the day. You pick it and it comes off. As long as you are sure that your light is good and that you're shooting like in an appropriate condition, there is not really a lot to get wrong.
Yes. Okay, guys, I think this should answer most of your questions. Hopefully, if you still have any questions, leave them in the comments down below, and we'll try to answer them. And also, make sure to follow this guy. He has a YouTube channel, and will also post videos about photography and also film photography.
Yeah.
And also follow him on Instagram. You can also follow me on Instagram if you're not already follow me.
It's a good thing.
And also pick up my Zine 28 if you haven't already. So this will support the channel and will help me to make more videos like this. And look forward to the videos that will come, because we will plan. We already shot videos, but we will shoot more.
Yep.
So in the next couple of weeks, you will see more videos, film shooting videos, and you will see the RB in action, and maybe some cool surprises. So.
Yep.
I would say, that's about it. Sweating like crazy, and by the way, we got kicked out of the first location we tried to film. For some reason in a park you're not allowed to film video here in Bangkok. I don't know. So far it's been looking good, so nobody is...
outside of him from the jogging.
Yeah, yes. But he's cool with that.
He's cool.
Okay, guys, until then, like and subscribe as always, and we will see each other in the next one. Until then, auf Wiedersehen.